Becoming Harry's big cousin, the original author chose Muggle. As Sun said, Merlin will close a door for you and open a window for you. After obtaining a strange mage system, Merlin opened the skylight above Dali's head. Well, maybe Merlin lifted the roof of Dali's house. Dali Dursley. Listen to me explain, it's not what you think. I'm really a spellcaster. Under the moon, Dali twisted his waist in a strange posture, and a BGM echoed from behind. Alright, I'm going to have a showdown. I admit that wizards have limits, so I shouldn't be a wizard anymore. Potter. System, if you continue like this, I will learn 70.2 transformations and become a super scion. This book is also known as The Gods of Physics, Everything But Magic. Actually, I can magic, and I'm not Harry Merlin. There are already 3 million word completed works, and 2 million word completed work is guaranteed. Please rest assured to collect it. Keywords of the novel. Hogwarts. I am Harry's big cousin. No pop-ups. Hogwarts. I am Harry's big cousin. Complete TXT download. Hogwarts. I am Harry's big cousin. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. The Man Who Cannot Say His Name. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The Man Who Cannot Say His Name. The weather in London is like the mood of a young daughter.in.law who has just started dating, constantly changing. 1 second, it was still clear, and the next second, it started to rain lightly. The rain mixed with dust creates a unique odor. Located in Cape Surrey, southwest of downtown London, is a historic elementary school called St. George's Primary School. On the inner side of the exterior wall, 3 oily and dirty faces look like senior students lazily leaning against the wall, their faces full of decadence, in sharp contrast to the youthful and energetic campus style, showcasing their personal characteristics. Coincidentally, Dowding, wearing large black framed glasses, a much larger school uniform, and a lightning scar on his forehead, hurriedly walked past the 3 of them holding bread. After 2 people exchanged a glance, the taller one quickly followed suit. The person hugged little Dowding by the shoulder and said in a very familiar language, "Look, isn't this our Mr. Kate? When are you planning to repay the 50 pence you owed me last week?" Dowding has never seen such a formation before. He lowered his head in fear and dared not look at them. He could only weakly defend himself. "I'm sorry, sir, you're trying to identify the wrong person. My name is not Kate." As soon as he spoke, he was slapped on the face, his glasses flew to one side, and his hair was messed up. The tall man said fiercely, "Are you saying that my eyes are not good? I said you are Kate and you are Kate." Perhaps there was a bit of commotion, and the children around them all cast inquiring glances. At this moment, the other 2 people leaning against the wall also stood up, one responsible for driving away and the other responsible for monitoring, while the other person pulled Little Bean Ding towards the hidden area of the school. The movements are very skilled and smooth, obviously not the first time I have done such a thing. There is always a tendency in schools to bully others, especially in schools like St. George's Elementary School, where there are even more. For example, these few people who take away Dowding are like this. The children around had never seen such a formation before, and they were all scared and ran away. "Bring it to you." The chubby boy next to him snatched the bread from Dowding's hand and said, "I haven't had breakfast yet, so I happened to taste it. Bah! This broken bread is as hard as a stone. Who would like to eat this damn thing?" Although he tried hard, he could only leave a tooth mark on the bread, which made his cheeks ache. "That's my brother's favorite baguette." Dowding quickly picked up the despised bread and held it in his arms, afraid that the other party would take it away again. Looking at the shallow tooth marks on the bread, he said in a slightly crying voice, "That's it." Dudley would be angry if he knew someone had touched his food. Dowding's overly nervous attitude towards Noodles did not catch the attention of the 3 of them. It should be noted that even after being slapped in the face just now, Dowding did not respond. The chubby little boy among them said with a disdainful expression, "What kind of thing is your brother? Who dares to provoke our hobbit trio, St. George? Right, it's your brother's bread. The tall man rolled his eyes and leaned down to pat Doubting's face. He said with a gentle expression, so your brother Moses also owes us 50 pence. Look, now your two brothers owe us a total of £1. My brother's name is neither Moses nor Kate. Doubting was trembling with fear, but still tried to argue. He knew that if he compromised out of fear, even more terrifying things would happen. Didn't you understand what I just said? Hearing Doubting dare to refute himself, the tall man changed his previous kindness and his expression immediately became fierce. Now, please tell me your name. The speed of facial transformation is unparalleled. Harry Potter. Harry Potter. Pop. Harry's face was slapped again. The tall man cursed and said, don't you understand what I'm saying? Your name is Kate, and you and your brother owe us a total of £1. Why do tall people always insist on changing the other person's name? Because once the other person admits it, even if they report it to the teacher, they can still be said to have mistaken the person. After all, they are asking Kate to recover the money they owe, not asking Harry for money. As for money, that was given to them by Harry on his own initiative. However, upon hearing the name spoken by Xiao Doubting, the silent member of the trio suddenly changed his expression and quickly stopped the tall man, saying, Jim, stop, he said his name is Harry Potter. So what's going on? Harvey. Jim didn't understand his companion's meaning and asked back with a puzzled expression on his face. Let's go quickly. Harvey quickly pulled the two of them to leave. The chubby little boy, driven by Harvey's tense atmosphere, quickly said, what do his parents do? He thought he had offended someone who shouldn't have been offended, such as his parents being police officers or thugs, and they were still quite afraid. I heard his parents died in a car accident. Harvey blurted out and urged his companions again, now is not the time to say this, let's go quickly. Upon hearing Harvey's words, the chubby little boy breathed a sigh of relief, and Jim said angrily, then you're afraid of nothing. He felt that his companions were crazy, and in a little while they would have £1 credited, which was a whole £1. And Harvey was about to be dumbfounded by his two companions and cried, his brother is Dali. Dudley. Which Dudley? Jim was still in a daze and had not regained consciousness. How many Dudleys are there at St. George's Elementary School? Of course it's that one. Dudley Dursley. Harvey raised a tone, but when he mentioned the other person's name, he noticeably lowered his volume, feeling hopeless that his companion had not yet reacted. Who is that? The short and chubby boy still doesn't know why, and he is very dissatisfied with the behavior of his companion, a riddle person. What can't he say in one breath? Poke and move, are you squeezing toothpaste? Jim, who still had some brain, turned to Harry and said, hey, that Potter, how old is your brother? Just like me, 4th grade. Harry was an honest child, so he answered truthfully. What's so scary about a 4th grade student? Jim felt completely relieved and puzzled by his peers' neurotic nervousness. We'll graduate after this year. What are you really worried about, Harvey? So if you've heard of this name, haven't you? It seemed that Harvey had made a great decision and asked his companions to lean towards him, trying to lower his voice as much as possible, as if afraid that others would hear him. A name was spoken in an extremely slow and gentle voice. Dali the Foodie Protector. His words seemed to open up some taboo. Everyone who heard this name, including Harry, was breathless. P.S. Harry Potter's parents died in a car accident when Aunt Penny told him. P.S. 2. Dudley is a month and a week older than Harry. P.S. 3. The character playing Dudley is called Harry Merlin. P.S. 4. There is another chapter in the afternoon. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Master Training System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Master Training System, Gudong. Upon hearing the name, several people's throats wriggled and they swallowed a mouthful of saliva together. That name is a taboo that cannot be mentioned in St. George's Elementary School. The three of them felt a cold wave coming and shivered together. Seems like I heard someone talking about me. A very soft voice sounded, but it sounded like thunder in the ears of four people. A palm appeared at the corner of the wall, and a huge shadow seemed to be gradually emerging with white smoke, blocking the sunlight above the three of them. Just now, facing Harry's arrogant trio, I felt my throat dry. How to describe the other party? Just their arms are thicker than their thighs. In terms of physique alone, this undoubtedly appears to be a strong man, but from his tender little face, it can be seen that he is still a child, and his robust physique often gives people the illusion of facing a burly man. If you want to describe it, it is that the art style is completely different from theirs. Just standing in place gives a suffocating sense of oppression. Harvey swallowed his saliva and didn't recognize the other person, but his iconic figure also made him aware of their identity. I saw the other party show a very kind smile. However, such a simple smile made the three of them feel a fear from the bottom of their hearts. Dali Desley, a boy whose name alone can stop children from crying at night. What are you going to do to my dear cousin? Glancing at the three of them, it gave them an illusion that they were being targeted by natural enemies, or that it was not an illusion. No, nothing, sir. The three of them spoke in unison, even using honorific language. That's good, I don't like violence and trouble. Dali nodded with a smile and once again showed a self-proclaimed elegant smile to the few people. The three people watching were once again heart-pounding. Walking up to Harry, he put his black-framed glasses back on his face. When he saw the slightly red fingerprints on Harry's face, his face darkened. Draw yourself. Dali turned his head and face expressionlessly toward Sanren. Apply force, I don't want to say it again. The suffocating sense of oppression rushed towards them, as if their entire hearts were being tightly held by each other. Rather than facing a person, they are more like a wild beast. At least in Harvey's opinion. Pop, 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 the crisp sound of slapping oneself sounded. No one can question Dali's decision, no one can bargain in front of Dali. No matter what request, it's best to follow his advice. With a few slaps, my face immediately swelled up. It can be seen that it is really hitting hard. They dare not perfunctory, let alone stop. Until the three of them had swollen faces, Dudley finally asked Harry, "Are you satisfied?" Harry. Satisfied. Harry nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Dali nodded in satisfaction and pouted, "It's okay." Upon hearing Dali's words, the three of them dared to stop. Without necessity, Dali does not like to use violence and insists on being an easy-going person. You see, it's all them slapping themselves, not me, Dudley Desley. Harry took the wand from Harry and was about to enjoy it when he saw the tooth marks at the end. He frowned again and said, "Who moved my lunch?" Just a simple question made the three of them tremble like chaff, especially the short and chubby guy who was almost scared to tears. Guess why Dali is called a food protector? Jim mustered up the courage and said, "Listen to my explanation, there were some misunderstandings that occurred." "I don't want to know any misunderstandings." Dali revealed his white teeth and said, "I just want to know when you will repay the £4 you owe my brother." Seems to know nothing, but in fact, I understand everything. These people are just trying to borrow some money from Harry to spend money, which is not uncommon in St. George's Elementary School, or rather common in most elementary schools. Little thugs and bullies, this kind of residue exists in any school. As he himself said, "I don't like trouble. Since you want to borrow, then lend to you. Whether to give it or not is my responsibility, and whether to repay it or not is the other party's responsibility." Harry's glasses happened to need a new one. The inexplicable words stunned all three, but Jim reacted the fastest. "We will return it to you in a week, sir. Here. Even if you go to steal or rob, you must get it, spend money to avoid disasters. 3 days later, Dali looked disdainful and tore off the saliva on the stick. And my bread compensation. Speaking, Dudley scrutinized Harry's face again and said, a slap costs £1.05, so you owe our brothers a total of £9.15. Thank you. £9.15. On average, each person costs around £3.05. For a poor student, this means a considerable amount of wealth. The chubby guy wriggled his lips as he heard the words. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Dudley's face darken as he put his almost toothless wand into his mouth and chewed it vigorously, making a creaking sound, like eating some crispy food. In that moment, the chubby guy thought of his fingers, thought of some limited-level bloody scenes, and swallowed his words again. As for the 3 of them teaming up to beat him up. Don't joke anymore. Look at the streamlined muscles that stack up like small mountains. Can 3 rabbits together beat a brown bear? No one wanted to teach Dali a lesson, and even contacted the thugs from the neighboring high school, but they all ended up in the hospital. Dali not only didn't do anything wrong, but also received praise from the school. Be brave and righteous. Go to hell and act bravely. Looking at Dali's broad and thick arms and sturdy arms, the 3 of them unconsciously swallowed saliva again, their arms unable to withstand their thighs. I heard that Dali won the Southeast Youth Heavyweight Intercollegiate Boxing Championship in 3rd grade. What concept is this? This competition is usually only open to middle school students, and Dali not only participated but even won the championship. The 3 of them tied together is not enough for each other to punch. Under Dali's heavy chewing, a magic stick was quickly eliminated. He handed the part of the stick that had just been torn off to the chubby boy and said, "Don't waste food, eat this." The chubby little boy dared not resist, tearfully took it and put it in his mouth. Then he bit hard, only to hear a click sound, and one of his teeth fell out. Tears streaming down his face and blood streaming down his mouth, coupled with his swollen pig head, he looked very miserable. Is this eating stones? It must be, Jim and Harvey thought to themselves, and at the same time, they had a new understanding of Dali's terror. At this moment, Dali's whole body paused slightly, his originally furrowed eyebrows relaxed, and a slightly naive smile bloomed on his face. However, in the eyes of the trio, this smile had nothing to do with simplicity, it was definitely a devil's smile. Don't you have any more ideas, do you? I really can't come up with pounds. There's not a penny left, Mom, I dare not dare again. They dare not even question and can only silently pray in their hearts. Dali naturally wouldn't be so bored and continued to extort a few poor students. He heard a warning sound ringing in his ear. Rescue the young savior Harry Potter and reward a physical lottery once. New book seeking collection and attention, end of this chapter. Chapter 3. Is Shinji Kane also referred to as a magician? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Is Shinji Kane also referred to as a magician? Hey, what are you guys doing? The lunch break is over. The teacher's shout came from not far away. The 3 of them only felt that the teacher, who was usually annoying, was so kind at the moment and was about to take the opportunity to leave. Dali let out a soft snort, but it made the 3 of them stop in an instant, as if taking root and unable to move a single inch. Didn't get Dali's approval, give it a try. Give us what you owe in 3 days' time, and don't let me see you bully anyone again. Get lost. Upon hearing Dali's words, the 3 of them, as if granted amnesty, ran at the fastest speed in their lives and disappeared from sight. So it's Dali. The teacher walked over and saw that it was Dali, with a smile on his face immediately. Dali, a demon-like figure in the eyes of students, is a different image in the eyes of teachers. There is no other reason Dali's academic performance is very good, and almost all the top subjects in the school are passed with full marks every year, making him a role model for learning. To use the OWL exam data in Wizarding to describe it, Dali's academic performance is O, excellent, physical education is O, excellent, height development is O, excellent, and even body shape is O, excellent. Moreover, Dali enjoys participating in various competitive events very much, and the key is that as long as he participates, he can always bring back the school's first medal. There are too many trophies in the display cabinet to fit. Do you think the teacher likes him or not? After a brief conversation, the teacher left. Only Harry and Dudley are left. Dudley, I'm sorry, I couldn't protect your lunch. Harry seemed to have made a great decision and mustered up his courage. Upon hearing this, Dali frowned again and said, "What should you call me?" Harry's courage, which he had finally mustered up, suddenly burst into tears and he said, "Sorry, Brother D." Brother D, or rather Big D, is an intimate title that only Dali friends can use. Harry, actually you don't have to be so afraid of me. Okay, Brother D. This conversation left Dudley speechless. He swore that he had never bullied Harry since he came to this world, and God knows why Harry was so afraid of him. I am clearly a very easy-going person. He has indeed never bullied Harry, but every time he beats someone else, Harry happens to be by his side. Dudley's cruel side has left a deep impression on Harry's young soul. After a few simple conversations, Harry was asked to stay in the classroom, while he himself found a secluded place to check on the gains. Dali is not a person from this world now. His name is Dudley Dursley, the cousin of the famous Harry Potter in the wizarding world, a passerby who drives the plot, and a clown who couldn't even be considered a villain in the early days. It is also the Muggle chosen by the original author, who is destined to have no chance of magic. If nothing miraculous had happened, Dudley would never have been able to unleash even half of his magic for a lifetime. As the saying goes, blessings come from misfortunes, and misfortunes come from blessings. Heaven closed a door and opened a window for him at the same time. Suppressing his inner excitement and joy, Dali pushed open the window. A few golden characters with a mysterious aura slowly appeared before Dali's eyes. This is something that only Dali can see, and it is also a unique, golden finger, exclusive to Dali. The mage training system, literally speaking, is a system for cultivating mages. Save the young savior Harry Potter and reward a physical lottery. Do you want to draw now? Dali watched as these big characters slowly appeared before his eyes. Rubbing my hands vigorously, I ran to the school restroom and washed my hands carefully. As for the lottery, of course, we need to wash away the bad luck first, and then introduce European energy into the body, so as to win the big prize. We have all traveled to the magical world, so we must believe in mysticism. At the moment when Dali pressed the lottery button, an old slot machine appeared in front of him, and 3 squares began to roll wildly. No matter whether it's meaningful or not, the sense of ceremony is quite impressive. With the start of the joystick, the pattern on the screen began to scroll continuously, and the entire process was beyond the control of Dali, only waiting quietly for the result. Recalling the experience of the last lottery draw, the last time he drew was JoJo Wonderful Adventure. Ripple Qigong. This is a unique cultivation technique that uses a unique breathing technique to control the body and greatly enhance physical fitness. It can also achieve various effects through subtle control. In the later stages of cultivation, it can surpass human limits and even resist aging. At that time, Dali was quite puzzled by how a mage training system would draw such a thing. The system explained to him, a strong physique is the fundamental condition for becoming a caster. That's quite reasonable, he accepted it. Since then, Dali has been practicing Ripple Qigong every day, which has given him his current robust physique. But coach, Dali wants to learn magic. No one dislikes magic, and compared to physical exercise, it is obvious that the supernatural magic is more enchanting. With Dali's sigh, the slow stop of the slot machine also revealed the series to which the reward was drawn, Type Moon World Fate, the Holy Grail Wars 3 Houses. A few words popped out of the slot machine again. Looking at these words, Dali raised his eyebrows. This time it should be magic. Although magic is commonly referred to as magic in that world, spellcasters are referred to as magicians. But even magicians can at least unleash a fireball spell, right? In Dali's anticipation, a picture emerged before my eyes. That was a young man with a blue seaweed head, with a lewd smile on his face, and his hand resting on the thigh of a red-clad girl with a double ponytail. The classic scene from the UBW storyline in Fate Stay Night. I can play with this leg for a year. Congratulations on obtaining Jian Tongshan Second Magician Constitution. Jiantong Shinji, the eldest son of the magic family, was very eager to become a magician when he was young. It was only when he grew up that he realized that his wish was destined to be unfulfilled. He did not have the qualifications to become a magician, and even vented his anger on his adopted sister Jiantong Sakura, committing many things that angered both humans and gods. A clown who, like Dali Desley, drives the plot. However, in terms of severity, Dali is far inferior to him. The only thing worth praising is his good performance. He is also the deputy director of the archery department. For this, Dali obtained the ability to bow an arrow LV1. Rao, who has been practicing Ripple Qigong for many years and can handle most situations with ease, couldn't help but feel a little nervous on his face and cursed loudly. Jiantong Shinner Magician's Physique. I laughed when I saw it. Do you look like a magician, Jian Tongshan? Not to mention, you're a little short, at least 108,000 miles short. What can you do with Jian Tongshan Air, also known as a magician? End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The 4 thinnest books in the world, seeking various tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The 4 thinnest books in the world, seeking various tickets. It has been several days since the blue seaweed head magician was drawn, and after the initial depression, Dali quickly adjusted his condition. Life should still go on as usual. Instead of complaining and blaming others, it's better to find ways to improve oneself. So Dali crazily devoted himself to the physical exercise of practicing Ripple Qigong. St. George's Primary School. Dali, I heard that last time you went to Oxford Dragon Elementary School. How did it feel to be an exchange student? A few sturdy boys wearing olive team uniforms hugged Dali's neck and asked with a friendly expression. Not all students are afraid of Dali. He is not a fighting maniac and causes trouble everywhere. As he himself said, he hates trouble. As long as it doesn't touch on principles, Dali is usually very elegant and easygoing. Of course, these boys wearing olive team uniforms are not students of St. George's Elementary School, but students of the boxing team from the neighboring Smeton High School who are about to graduate. It's boring, there are all a bunch of bookworms there, said Dali, taking a hot dog and chewing it vigorously in his mouth. Upon hearing the system message of eating a complete hot dog experience +1 ringing in my mind, I felt incredibly relieved. The mage training system, in addition to occasional tasks, replenishes energy by consuming food. Dali can activate some common life skills through experience points. Of course, those skills have nothing to do with magic, and according to the system's explanation, they are all some daily-oriented skills. For example, English, mathematics, physics, chemistry, firearms, boxing, archery, and so on. This thing called the mage training system is exceptionally stingy when it comes to things related to magic, while others are quite generous. I'll finish eating anyway. That's also why Dali is called a food protector. Touching his food is equivalent to his enemy. I heard that the students at that school are all very good at learning. Has Mr. Dali been discouraged? Good at studying. Generally speaking, it's just above the standard. Apart from being able to study hard, there's nothing remarkable about it. Dali waved his hand and picked up a glass of happy water to drink in one gulp. Drinking a complete cup of happy water experience +1, thinking of the experience of becoming an exchange student at Oxford Dragon Elementary School, Dali found it amusing. He gave that group of bookworms a good lesson, both in academics and sports. Every time he thinks of those little girls and ghosts running back with runny noses and bubbles on their faces, Dali finds it funny. Neo Jinlong Primary School is located in Oxfordshire, UK, and is a mixed-sex private primary school. It is claimed to be a preparatory school for the University of Oxford. As we all know, a preparatory university is equivalent to haha. In fact, Dudley's grades and abilities should not have been in St. George's Elementary School. As for why the Dursley family sent Dudley and Harry to this school, the main reason is that it is a public school, which means the tuition fees are cheap. You should know that the Dursley family has to bear not only the cost of Dudley's own education, but also Harry's. Just look at the clothes on Dudley and Harry and you'll know. Harry was wearing Dudley's old school uniform, and although Dudley was wearing new clothes, the material was also average. Moreover, with the ability to eat Dali, life becomes even more difficult. In fact, Dursley didn't initially have as much wealth as he did when he appeared in the movie, and he was still quite struggling during Harry's elementary school years until 2 months ago. Dudley's father, Vernon Dursley, relied on the recommendation of his sister Maggie Dursley to work at Granning Company and successfully negotiated a large drilling rig order before the situation improved. Now they are discussing transferring to Dali, otherwise Dali wouldn't be doing any exchange students. However, Dudley doesn't want to go to other schools, mainly because there's no Harry there, and he can't be by his side to pick wool. Given the fees charged by private schools, the Dursley family is unlikely to be able to afford the expenses of both Dudley and Harry studying there at the same time. Even if they can afford it, they won't let Harry go. His mother Penny Dursley and his father Vernon Dursley don't really like Harry. As for the reason, it's a long story. As he swallowed his last piece of food, he happened to see Harry coming out of the teaching building with his backpack on his back. Dudley turned his head to look at the group of friends from the Smithing High School boxing team and said, "It's been a long time since I've been active. Do you want to practice?" After a strange silence, everyone glanced at each other and began to wander around looking for various excuses. "I have something else to do today. My mother asked me to go home early. I forgot to close my door." In the end, only Dali remained. It is precisely because of their good relationship with Dali that they can better understand the terrifying aspects of Dali and practice with him, which is called Tsuenzue, no need to seek abuse. Dali pouted and said, "Tisk, it's really boring." He walked briskly towards his dear little cousin Harry, grabbed his neck, and affectionately said, "Let's go home together." Watching the two gradually drift away until they disappear at the end of the street, the students of St. George's Elementary School finally breathed a sigh of relief together. Oh my goodness! Poor little Harry is going to be bullied by his wicked cousin again. So, are you going to save him? Don't joke, are you asking me to go and die? The rumor was formed in this way, and it was clear that Dudley and Harry had a good relationship. Well, at least Dali thinks so himself. The two of them live at number 4 Privet Drive in the Little Workin district of Surrey, not far from the school, about a 20-minute walk away. Seeing Harry walking with his head buried, Dudley took the initiative to break the silence. He took out a few crumpled banknotes from his pocket and said, "Harry, this is the £8.50 left for fixing glasses. I don't think it's safe to put them in your hands. I'll save them for you to use when you get married." "Okay, Brother D." Harry had heard the same words countless times and his ears were almost calloused. Upon hearing this, Dali was satisfied and put a few banknotes back into his pocket. At this moment, he transformed into Grande Dali. It's not that he's really stingy. Harry keeps a clear record of every account he has here, mainly because Dudley needs to constantly consume food to ensure the system's energy collection. Fortunately, most of the food Dali eats is converted into muscle, otherwise according to his way of eating, it is destined to become Dali round. Pushing open the door of the double-decker small Western-style building, Dali, with a super-sensitive sense of smell, smelled the aroma of dinner and immediately increased his appetite. Indeed, the 4 thinnest books in the world are American history, German jokes, Italian war heroes, and English recipes. There are indeed not many delicious dishes in England, except for the fish and chips that every housewife knows. There are hardly any dishes that can be picked up. But no one stipulates that English people must cook English cuisine. Penny Dali is good at German cuisine, and the crispy elbow flavor is still very good. In the new book period, we need the care of all the readers. Vote more. Many recommendations. How many collections? End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Jerry, Teacher of the Lord of the Rings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Jerry, Teacher of the Lord of the Rings 4, Privet Drive, Little Huijean District, Surrey County. The sun rose above the tidy garden in front of the house, illuminating the fourth bronze medal on the door of the Dali family. The sunlight quietly crawled into their living room, shining on Mr. Dali's plump and naturally large buttocks. Mrs. Dali hummed a tune from a different era in the kitchen, carefully cooking breakfast. On the fireplace stand, there are many photos showcasing the members of their family to outsiders. The big-headed boy rides his first bicycle, rides on a carousel at the expo, plays computer games with his father, and is embraced and kissed by his mother, creating a scene of a happy family of 3. There is just a photo in the corner of the fireplace, indicating that there are more than 3 people in this family. Previously, the tall and big-headed boy was holding on to another skinny little boy wearing the same style of clothing, and both of them were smiling with sweet smiles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, one more time. Dali was supporting his entire body with a thumb, constantly rising and falling on his own lawn. Sweat dripped onto the emerald green lawn, soaking his entire back. Under Dali's body were all shapeless grass ravaged by him. Harry sat on the steps of the house, his head supported by his hands, quietly watching Dudley exercise, silently counting for him in his heart. 105, 106,200. Although Harry may seem intimidated by his cousin, he is actually willing to stay by Dudley's side because he feels at ease when interacting with him and is not seen as a transparent presence. When Harry silently counted to the 300th in his heart, Dudley finally stopped and sat on the lawn with a fart. Comfortable. Wiping sweat off his face, Dali's red and plump face was filled with contentment. Pick up 2 dumbbells placed aside and continue to exercise the biceps, one left and one right. Each 30 kilograms discus is like a plastic toy in Dali's hands. Whether or not one can learn magic, having a healthy and strong physique is always important. The story of the great white-robed wizard Gandalf tells us that to become an excellent wizard, one must first hold the sword and be able to strike strong orcs, and then learn the flash technique. Harry, you should also exercise. You're too thin and too short, you look like a malnourished skinny monkey. While exercising, Dali didn't forget to remind his little cousin, I'm secretly telling you that those blonde girls love muscular men like me the most. Strictly speaking, Harry is fine in all aspects except for being slightly thinner. Dudley said this because he is the object of comparison. Okay, Brother D. Harry replied wooden, unsure if he really didn't understand or if he pretended not to. The bright green eyes still stared blankly at Dali, unsure of what they were thinking. I feel like Harry in the movie isn't that silly, he's quite clever. My cousin is a bit foolish, what should I do? Online waiting, urgent. How can we deal with that guy without a nose in the future? Dali Dali, here is your letter. The shout of the messenger interrupted Dali's thoughts. Handing a thick letter to Dudley, the postman looked enviously at Dudley's abdomen, which had already outlined its muscular contours. Actually, there was one more sentence that Dali didn't finish just now. Besides being able to attract blonde girls, his muscles can also attract high attention from the same sex. Our great Sun has a saying. Fitness can attract the opposite sex, excessive fitness can attract the same sex. Dali looked at the seal of the envelope, which was a letter from Bloomsbury Publishing. Opening the envelope contained a letter filled with words and a check worth £10,000. Dudley looked around and found that no one except Harry was paying attention to him. He carefully collected the check in his pocket and finally opened the letter. Dear Teacher Jerry, the opening was a complex and lengthy compliment, a very official polite statement. Jerry, the pen name of Dali. When Dali first arrived in this world, the first thing he wanted to do was to make money. The saying goes, money travels the world, but without it, it's hard to move a single step. This is true in any world, and besides, the Dharma Master belongs to the profession of burning money. In addition, due to the difficult financial situation of the Dursley family before and the fact that he didn't have many tickets in his pocket, Dali was panicked, so he chose a path of no return. Submit a novel. Although Dali is well aware of the classic saying, learning mathematics, physics, and chemistry well, one is not afraid to travel around the world. When he was in school, his ears were almost worn out, and he also wanted to come up with something else. The key issue is that Dali's predecessor did not learn mathematics, physics, and chemistry well, and he also found it troublesome. Writing novels is the simplest and most risk-free way to make money. The fee for the first volume of The Lord of the Rings that you wrote has been paid into the envelope. We hope you will arrive at 60 o'clock this week. Please discuss in detail the publication of the second volume of The Lord of the Rings with Akashini from Bloomsbury Publishing. Thank you. The Jerry teacher who wrote the most popular fantasy novel of the year, Lord of the Rings, is Dali himself. This world is very different from what Dali was previously familiar with. I don't know if it's because of wizards. There are very few works of Western fantasy in this world, and none of the Western fantasy masterpieces in Dali's memory. At least the Lord of the Rings series of novels did not come to life, so Dali simply copied them in a small way. Of course, it is not a complete replication. He also added many ways of writing online articles, such as not deceiving hobbits for being short, such as 30 years in the East and 30 years in the West. Novels that are suitable for all ages are the king. So the sales of Lord of the Rings were even better than in the original world. The remuneration of £10,000 is still in England in the 1980s, which is already a considerable amount. Just based on the current popularity of Lord of the Rings, Dali should have gained more, but he is a newcomer. Having so much is already quite satisfying. Moreover, this is only the first volume. There is no need to focus solely on immediate interests, a steady stream is the key. Moreover, what was posted was not part of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, to be precise, only about half of that part. Someone without a nose has said that 7 is a magical number, so Dali also plans to break down the Lord of the Rings trilogy into 7. Well, the publishing house has already taken the initiative to come to their door. Nowadays, Dali is a golden signboard. Even if the next book is written with relying on defense, it will start with millions of sales. The so-called detailed discussion, in other words, refers to giving Dali money to increase the manuscript fee, and the specific situation depends on how we discussed on Saturday. Anyway, he has already accumulated a certain level of fame now. Your publishing house cannot provide a satisfactory price. I believe other publishing houses will be happy to offer a high price. The name Jerry now represents money. Dudley has already figured it out. After the completion of the 3.7 steps, he will open a Hobbit spin-off and make another profit. He will also sell movie copyrights or something. Wow, this money is enough for him to spend his entire life without extravagance. One step beyond financial freedom. I just don't know if becoming a wizard in the future is enough, and if it's not enough, I'll write a few more books. The Dragon Spear Chronicle seems to be good too. Dudley, who had harvested £10,000, was in a good mood. He patted little Harry's messy chicken house hair and said, "Harry, follow your big cousin and I'll treat you to ice cream." "Okay, Brother D." Before they could leave the garden, they heard Mrs. Dursley's shout from the window. "Oh, my dear Dolly little baby, where are you going? Come over and have breakfast first." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Harry, we are brothers, seeking vote. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Harry, we are brothers, seeking votes. Since changing jobs, Vernon Dursley's business has been doing better and better, growing bigger and stronger, as evidenced by the recent number of appliances purchased at home and the frequency of clothing changes for the family. Oh, dear Dolly baby, how do you like the clothes I bought for you? Penny gestured on Dolly's body with a black and white checkered shirt, which was already the largest size in the store. Try it on quickly, it must fit very well. Penny's aesthetic for the black and white checkered shirt is truly amazing. Aunt Penny. Harry happened to push the door open at this moment and weakly shouted when he saw Penny, while his eyes lingered on Dudley or the new clothes for a few more seconds. What you can get at your fingertips may be something others crave. For Harry, who is currently staying at Aunt Penny's house, having enough to eat every day is already quite good, and new clothes are just a luxury. Harry hides well, but Dali is not blind. Setting aside the reason of staying by the side of the Savior to complete missions, Dudley felt quite sorry for Harry. Harry, who grew up in an environment where his parents passed away shortly after he was born, could only be placed in foster care with his aunt who didn't treat him much. He had long been accustomed to seeing others' faces and was sensible, which was heartbreaking. What Dolly can do is to treat him as well as possible. Mom, where's Harry? In fact, Dudley knew that his mother's feelings for Harry were very special and not purely disgusted. Dudley had seen Penny staring at Harry's back in a daze, or staring into Harry's eyes in a daze, with a complex expression in his eyes, whether it was nostalgia, memories, or sadness. There were all kinds of emotions, but there was no disgust. Of course, this is a rare situation, and most of the time Penny doesn't have a good face towards Harry. His father Vernon was the same, constantly calling Harry the freaky, but mostly in front of his mother. Of course, if Penny wasn't there, Vernon wouldn't have paid any attention to Harry at all. Lee also has it. Penny reluctantly took out a piece of clothing of the same style but 2 sizes smaller from her handbag and handed it to Harry. Without much emotional fluctuation, she said, "This is yours." Harry took the clothes with a joyful expression on his face, not caring at all about Penny's attitude. Anyway, he had new clothes, just like Dudley. With Dolly as a lubricant, the relationship between the 4 of them is actually quite harmonious, and Harry's living environment is not too bad. Do you like it? But I'll have to wait a while before I can wear it. Dudley walked up to Harry and patted his shoulder. He saw his puzzled gaze and said, "Did you forget? I promised to help you decorate your room today. Don't you often complain to me that whenever someone goes upstairs, dust will fall from the room? It's a pity to get dirty when wearing new clothes now." As Dudley spoke, he took out his toolbox from the drawer, grabbed Harry's neck, and walked towards his cabin. Saying it's a cabin is actually just a closet below the stairs. That's Harry's room. This busyness is all about tinkling and pounding all day long. After all, with the support of LV2 decoration capabilities provided by the system, Dolly's hands-on ability is still good. With all his busy work, at least it looks more like a small room. When Harry pushed open the door again, his eyes widened in disbelief. Is this really the small closet that I used to live in, which was black, cold, dusty, and surrounded by spiders all day long? Not to mention earth-shattering, it can only be said that it has completely changed. Dudley installed night lights in the room, soft yet not dazzling, which meant that Harry no longer had to endure darkness at night. The surroundings were repainted and new wallpapers were pasted, and a suspended ceiling was added, which meant that Harry no longer had to worry about the dust falling from his head. Even the bed was replaced with a new one, which was very soft and comfortable. In addition, Dudley also decorated the room with some small decorations, and even used some techniques from previous life arrangements to make the whole room more three-dimensional. What a cozy little house. Under the meticulous arrangement of Dali, except for the slightly smaller room area, it looks quite impressive no matter how it looks, especially in this era where the decoration has not yet formed a style. Watching his face still covered in dust and his chubby face covered in a grey layer of Dudley, Harry was deeply moved. That cousin, who used to be a bit vicious and stingy, is now so amiable. Especially just ordinary complaints, I didn't expect the other party to remember, and Harry's heart was greatly touched. Just decorations alone will cost a lot of money, right? I've seen that little cactus decoration before, it costs a whole £1. Decorating these must have consumed all of Dudley's savings. Previously, Dudley's kindness towards him gradually appeared before Harry's eyes. Thank you, Brother D. Dudley was slightly stunned at the words, his dirty hand scratching his head, as if he didn't expect Harry, who was usually dull, to thank him. This is a good start. Thank you for what? We are brothers. It's a blood-related brother who breaks bones and connects tendons, so there's no need to be so polite between family members. Dali wiped a sweat on his face, and because his hands were also dirty, his face became even more bloated. Brother, family. Little Harry didn't pay attention to this point and just chewed on these two words repeatedly, his tone becoming more firm as he spoke. If the whole world is not good to you, and only one person is good to you, that person will definitely occupy a dominant position in your heart. Dudley patted Harry's shoulder and said with deep meaning, if you become rich in the future, Harry, you will definitely not forget my cousin, will you? Brother D, you will definitely be better than me in the future, Harry said with great self-awareness. The Dali in front of me is simply a decathlon expert, far surpassing the average person in terms of grades, sports, and other aspects. If it weren't for the notorious reputation of being a foodie, he would definitely be the most popular figure among girls in the school. Compared to Dudley, Harry, who is as transparent as a little boy in school, is truly ashamed of himself. He is now a big Muggle, even if his physical fitness is good, he is just a stronger Muggle, at least from the perspective of this world. Jian Tongshan's magician's physique has not shown any response except for enhancing Dali's physical fitness. What kind of magic rampage? There's nothing at all. Dudley believed that even if he could become a wizard in the future, he would still need the care of his little cousin. Harry's magical talent and expertise were not low at all, and he was also the protagonist. A good relationship is definitely beneficial without harm. Improve the living environment for young saviors and reward them with a prize draw for props. Upon hearing the heavenly sound in his ear, Dali's face lit up with joy. Harvest a wave of goodwill and rewards, no matter how you think, you won't lose. Well, fortunately Harry didn't know about this. Let's go, Harry. I'll treat you to ice cream. Dudley, who was in a good mood, vigorously rubbed Harry's messy hair. Okay, Brother D. But you shouldn't have it. As soon as Harry spoke, Dudley saw through his thoughts and continued to rub Harry's well-felt chicken coop head. Don't worry, my little cousin. Big cousin still has the money to treat you to an ice cream. He said the ice cream is sweet, and Harry's heart is also warm. Upon careful consideration, my big cousin is not stingy at all. Although he often makes himself run errands, he often treats himself to delicious food when feeling wronged. You are also the first to stand up for yourself. Anyway, it feels great to have my brother doting on me. When you think a person is good, then whatever they do is good. Penny looked at the backs of her two brothers, hunched over and over. Her thoughts seemed to go back to many, many years ago, when she and her sister were so close. They would share everything they had and chat all night about their future and ideals, until the day Lily received her admission letter at the age of 11. Since then, they have become people from two different worlds. Penny finally let out a sigh, shook her head inexplicably, and walked into her room. Request for tickets, new book period, tickets and collection are equally important. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Mrs. Figure Next Door. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Mrs. Figure Next Door. Mom, I think we can take care of ourselves. Dali frowned as he looked at his parents. Recently, Vernon's job has made great progress. The groaning company has arranged for him to go on a business trip to Germany to negotiate a large order. As long as he can successfully sign the contract this time, he can be promoted to sales manager. However, the time is a bit long, and it is expected to take 3 months. In theory, only Vernon is on a business trip, and Penny can take care of Dali and the others at home. However, Vernon is a Penny, and as long as he doesn't see Penny at home every day, he is guaranteed to be completely unconscious the next day, and his work efficiency will plummet. So Penny also had to go with him. Fortunately, the expenses could be reimbursed by the company. "Darling, you're still a child," Penny said with a serious expression on her face. Upon hearing these words, Dali rolled his eyes in his heart. Have you ever seen a 10-year-old child win a high school boxing championship? This is the championship that Dali recently won. It's different from the junior high school level one last year. This is from the high school group. Harry and I are both 10 years old, and at this age, in other worlds, we can all claim our initial Pokémon to travel around the world. Dali was muttering in his heart. I can cook and do laundry myself, I mean we can take care of ourselves. Dali argues with reason. Dudley, we're not going for a day or two, it's a whole 3 months. I won't let my child stay at home alone. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, Penny selectively ignored Harry. I won't let you stay alone with this monster either. Vernon also emphasized that the word monster naturally referred to Harry, and of course, this sentence was said in front of Penny. Who knows if this monster will make you look like him? I really wish I could become a wizard and dream about it. Then I won't go to Aunt Maggie's place, never. Dali spoke firmly and forcefully, emphasizing the first word he learned at birth, never. Maggie Dursley is Vernon's sister and Dali's aunt, and the Dursley family improved their lives with her help. Dali is very grateful to this aunt, but it is absolutely impossible for him to live with Aunt Maggie for 3 months. It's not that Aunt Maggie doesn't like Dali, on the contrary, she really likes Dali, and every time we meet, she has to give Dali a hard tug on his round face before giving up. It's just that their lifestyle habits are too far apart. Maggie has 12 bulldogs, which is not the key. The key is that she loves and values these bulldogs more than humans. That is to say, if you want to live with her, you first have to endure eating and sleeping with these 12 bulldogs, and secondly, you have to endure the possibility of the dog's saliva in your bowl at any time. Dali really likes dogs, but he doesn't like to eat their saliva. Seeing Dudley's resolute attitude, Vernon and Penny looked at each other. They also know that there will definitely be problems with Dali and Maggie's lives. How about taking Dudley with you to Germany? But the cost and Dali's academic performance. The two exchanged eye contact. Seeing his parents' attitude ease, Dudley quickly suggested, I can wait for you next door with Harry at Mrs. Figure's place. It's also impossible for him to go to Germany. Language barriers don't make much sense, so it's better to continue to stay by Harry's side and collect wool. Mrs. Fige, whose full name is Arabella Fige, is a kind and energetic little old lady who likes to wear knitted covers. She lives 2 streets away from the Dursley family. It's said to be 2 streets, but in fact, it's not much different from the next door. When the Dursleys go out or on vacation, they always entrust her to take care of Harry. Perhaps due to frequently taking care of Harry without compensation, the Dursley family and Mrs. Figure have a good relationship. Dali, we will be going for a full 3 months, during which we won't be able to come back. Penny tried to persuade Dali, but unfortunately, Dali's attitude was very firm. If you don't go to Mrs. Figure's house and don't let him stay at home, then you can only go to Aunt Maggie's house. How does this make Dali eat? Protector Dali will never compromise. After a heated argument, Dudley remained silent and helpless. Vernon and Penny had no choice but to entrust Mrs. Figure to take care of them. Harry, who had been thinking about not being able to continue living in his cabin for 3 months and feeling a bit sad, suddenly felt much better when he heard that he could live with his cousin Dudley. Seemingly realizing Harry's joyful mood, Vernon struggled to lean down on his chubby body and pointed at Harry, saying, "I'm warning you, kid. Even if we're not here, you don't want to harm Dudley or my family. Just let me know, you know the consequences." He raised his arm, which was thicker than Harry's waist, in a demonstration. Harry didn't know why, but he nodded obediently. Perhaps Harry can't remember it anymore. When he was very young, he didn't know if it was due to a magical outburst or other stimuli. In short, some magical phenomena occurred. Dudley's physique at that time was not as strong as it is now, so he was slightly injured. Vernon may not be a good uncle, but he is definitely a good husband and father. Mrs. Feeja's home decoration is very old-fashioned, and the overall size of the house is not much different from Dursley's, but the style is vastly different. The environment is slightly dim, and the furniture is also very simple. In addition to a burning fireplace in the living room, there is only a simple sofa, a table, and a few chairs. There are no electronic products, not even radios that elderly people like to use. Antiques. This is Dursley's evaluation of Mrs. Figger. The air is filled with a pungent cat smell from time to time, which can be quite pungent, but at least Dali doesn't feel it. Vernon didn't like the taste very much, so he didn't come in. Everything was communicated between Penny and Mrs. Feig. Mrs. Feig readily agreed to help take care of Dudley and Harry. Before leaving, Penny gave some money to Mrs. Feig. If Harry had the audacity to entrust Mrs. Figger to take care of him for free, he would have eaten less anyway. If we add a Dali, it won't work. Dali's daily appetite is probably more than Mrs. Fig's for a week. 3 months. Even with thick skin, Dursley couldn't do such a thing. Moreover, the reputation of the Dursley family is quite good on these streets, limited to ordinary families. As Penny and Vernon left, Dudley began to search around Mrs. Figger's house with ease. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he hugged a passing kitten with extreme agility. In the despairing gaze of the kitten, Dali buried his chubby face on the silver belly and took several deep breaths. Then, with a contented expression on his face, he let out a joyful moan. Ah, Schwer really sucks. From the perspective of actions, it is obvious that Dali is not doing this kind of thing for the first time. Seeking votes and collecting, end of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Discovery of Dali, New Book Issue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. The Discovery of Dali, New Book Issue. That's why Dudley wants to stay with Harry at Mrs. Figger's house, because she has many hairy children at home. In his past life, Dali had a great fondness for furry kids. He had raised several of them at home, but unfortunately, in this life, Vernon was allergic to cat hair. Otherwise, Dali would definitely have kept a bunch of these furry little cute ones at home. Dali, I think it's better for you to let go of Schwer. Look at her, she's already disgusted with you. Mrs. Figger looked at Dali with a smile. Mrs. Figger, I usually love Schwer very much. When I was a child, I fed her goat milk. If she still dislikes me, it would be too heartless. Dudley rubbed Schwer's stomach again. Dudley's body shape matches his behavior. It really means that he has a tiger in his heart and sniffs roses carefully. In fact, the silver gradually layered Schwer in Dali's arms, apart from her face full of disgust, did not resist much. On the contrary, there was a sound of snoring in her throat. Cats are not like dogs, especially when it comes to Dali's suction position, which is crucial to the abdomen. It is normal for cats to treat their suction behavior as an attack. If Dali and Schwer have a bad or average relationship, then they will definitely be greeted with a paw or a crazy scratching. It's not that you haven't come to see us for so long, Mrs. Figger said with a hint of blame in her tone. Schwer, Kick, Mr. Claw, and Meow don't even know you anymore. There are 4 cats, including Kick, Schwer, Mr. Paw, and Meow, all of which are raised by Mrs. Figger. From the conversation between the two, it can be seen that Dudley and Mrs. Fig have long known each other, and it can be understood that Dudley likes cats. Mrs. Fig is the only one on the street who keeps cats in recent times. Actually, at first Mrs. Figger didn't really like Dudley, or rather the Dursley family, until Harry was first placed at Mrs. Figger's house. Studying is really too heavy, Mrs. Figger. Not only do I have to learn cultural knowledge, but I also have to earn more medals for the school and participate in various exchange activities. It's exhausting, and I don't even have time to exercise anymore. Dali finally placed Schwer on the ground, but Schwer couldn't bear to leave and kept meowing at Dali. I saw Dali take out a pile of small dried fish from his wallet and feed Schwer one by one. Don't feed it too much, you won't be willing to eat well when the time comes. Mrs. Fig smiled and shook her head, admiring Dali's sturdy body like a little diamond. Your body is the strongest I've ever seen. After speaking, Mrs. Fig added another sentence to her heart. Perhaps only that person is stronger than you. During the conversation, the other cats in Mrs. Figger's house also smelled the smell and walked out of the room one by one, exploring their heads and rubbing around Dali's feet. On the one hand, it is for the dried fish in Dali's hands, and on the other hand, it is to leave one's own scent on Dali. Harry stood by the door like a little transparent, watching the two of them chatting happily. In fact, he was very envious of Dudley's social skills, as he could talk to anyone of any kind. By the way, Harry, Mrs. Figger remembered Harry at this moment and continued to ask the two of them, I think you should be hungry. I'll go get you some food. Mrs. Fig is good at making sausages, boiled pickled Chinese cabbage and mashed potatoes. But Dali doesn't want to eat these today. Because Penny can also do it, but her craftsmanship is slightly inferior to that of Mrs. Fig. Even the most delicious food can get greasy every day. After all, the recipe is too thin. Mrs. Figger, let me do it. Dudley threw the remaining dried fish to the cats, clapped his hands, and stood up. Today, I'll show you something. Mrs. Fig looked surprised and said, Can little Dudley still cook? She thought it was rare for the Dursley family's personality to cultivate Dudley like this, but she didn't expect him to even cook. Of course. Harry couldn't help but lick the corners of his mouth when he remembered the last time he tried Dudley's craft, and saliva began to secrete in his mouth. Brother D's food is very delicious. Seeing Harry say so, Mrs. Fig hesitated and allowed Dudley into the kitchen. Cut tofu into small pieces and blanch in hot water until cooked. Heat the wok with cold oil and stir-fry chopped scallions, ginger, and garlic until fragrant. Then add lean meat and stir-fry until color changes. Continuously stir-fry until fragrant under the busy work of Chef Dudley. Twice cooked pork, braised pork belly in brown sauce, mapo tofu, lion's head and the simplest tomato egg vegetable soup came out. 4 dishes and 1 soup are served on the table, emitting a tempting aroma. Just a quick taste captured the stomachs of Mrs. Figger and Harry in an instant. It's really delicious, Harry couldn't help but marvel as his mouth was filled with oil. Although Aunt Penny's cooking skills are good, unfortunately, the menu is too poor, and after a lot of twists and turns, there are only a few, which widens the gap compared to Dali. It's just a simple home-cooked dish. If you like it, I'll make it every day during this time, said Dali, finishing another bowl of rice. Penny doesn't allow Dudley to go to the kitchen in her own home. Even if you want to eat, you can only wait until there is no one at home. The cats, who had just had a full meal, were also attracted by the aroma of the food and jumped onto the table, sniffing the food on the plate with curiosity on their faces. But unfortunately, the first dish they chose was mapo tofu. The pungent smell of pepper and Chinese prickly ash was not the taste cats like, so they jumped again. Hey kids, the kitchen is my territory. Your task now is to study hard. Harry's expression began to gradually lose as he listened to Mrs. Fig's words. Finally, Mrs. Fig suddenly blinked her eyes and the conversation changed. But occasionally it's still possible. Omega, yeah. Harry smiled happily and raised the spoon. In the following days, life was very peaceful, and Dudley and Harry went to school, finished school, and exercised on the lawn as usual. Until Harry returned home after school due to school activities, but unfortunately, Mrs. Fig had to go out for some business and had not returned yet. Meow meow. As soon as she entered the room and hadn't had time to change her clothes, Schwer rushed over from one side of the room, anxiously shouting at Dali. "What's wrong, Schwer?" Dali didn't know why. It's true that he likes cats, but he really can't understand cat language. Meow meow. Seeing that Dudley didn't understand her meaning, Schwer first bit Dudley's pants and tugged hard a few times, then ran to the other side of the corridor, even reaching out her paw and pulling inside. Dali understood what Schwer meant and let herself follow it. It has to be said that Mrs. Fige's cat is more spiritual than ordinary cats, and Dali even suspects that they have the same mindset. On the other side of the corridor is a tightly closed wooden door, which is locked back. However, in the room where there should have been no one, there were sounds of chaos and flipping things. Could it be that there was a thief at home? Dali's first reaction was that there was a thief at home, and then he clenched his fists and stole from me. Can't we give you an unforgettable opportunity? Law enforcement officer Dali is about to make a comeback. The wooden gate couldn't stop Dali at all, but with a gentle force, the door pushed open. At the moment of pushing open the door, Dali did not see the expected thief, but instead saw a book. More precisely, it is a book that can move on its own. Even with teeth and eyes. At this moment, he was chasing Mr. Paw and running around the house with Meow Meow. Requesting tickets, this is the most lacking in the new book period. By the way, I didn't make up the name of the cat, it was originally these few. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Meow meow meow, new book issue ticket. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Meow meow meow, new book issue ticket, square in all directions, with a furry cover, for round and bright yellow big eyes, and a row of sharp teeth with exposed gums. Rather than being a book, it's more like some kind of monster. However, Dali still recognized it as a book at a glance. Because its body is engraved with several prominent large hot golden fonts. Monster Books of Monsters. Although he had known early on that Harry Potter had magical powers and longed for that magical world, he still saw this scene for the first time, or rather, it was the first time Dudley had come into contact with anything related to magic since he arrived in this world. If the magician's physique of Shinji Kane also counts, it would be the second time. Just as Dali was stunned, the strange book seemed to have discovered him, gave up chasing the cats, and turned his head to quickly pounce at Dali with his sharp teeth exposed. Upon seeing this, Schwer's fur exploded all over her body, and her whole body was fluffy. While exhaling at the strange book, she also let out a high scream. It is issuing a warning to the strange book. Unfortunately, Schwer's threat was of no use, and the strange book quickly pounced towards Dali. Schwer was very afraid of the strange book, but she still stood at Dali's feet, and her claws hidden under the meat mat also reached out, intending to take a desperate blow. "Hey, how do you deal with this thing?" "Curse it. But I don't know." Dali tried to find a solution to the problem, but in the corner of his eye, he saw a cat lying motionless on the ground. It's the fourth cat kicking. Kicking or injury or death. Anyway, it must be this strange book that did it. Dali originally liked cats, and with the time spent together, he was even more fond of the four cats. Anger surged in my heart. "Forget it, let's use my own method," said Dali as he rolled up his sleeves. Looking at the approaching strange book, he took a step forward and suddenly punched. With lightning speed, hit the monster book with unparalleled accuracy. The muffled sound of heavy objects falling to the ground sounded as if a strong man was pounding the ground with a hammer, causing the entire room to tremble slightly. Then the world became quiet. It was this punch from the beginning, when Dudley swiftly killed the guy who claimed to be the strongest high school boxer in England. Dali slowly withdrew his fist against the cover of the monster book, while the monster book lay quietly in place without any movement. Let me see if it's another one. Dali pinched the spine of the strange book with one hand and shook it. At this point, this strange book had become very honest, limp, and had two ribbon-like tongues sticking out of its mouth. If that's really the tongue, won't you be beaten to death with just one punch? Seeing that the book was motionless, Dali couldn't help but think. I remember I took in 3 parts of the force. How should I compensate if this thing really dies? Just as Dali was lost in thought, a cry of surprise sounded outside the door. Oh, my Merlin, what exactly happened? Mrs. Feig, who was still holding a vegetable basket in her hand, ran in a panic and looked at the messy room that seemed to have entered a thief. Her expression changed slightly and she asked Dudley. Shao Dali, what exactly happened? There are more doubts in the tone than doubts. To be honest, Mrs. Feig's attitude is already very good. Imagine if you promise to help your neighbors take care of their children, even trusting them to give them a key to your own door, but one day when you come home, you find him in the room you deliberately locked, and the room is still in a mess. It's you, what would you think? At least if it were Vernon, he wouldn't be so calm. Mrs. Fig, I thought there was a thief at home. Dali shook the strange book in his hand and said, this guy killed and kicked. Mrs. Figger pointed at a cat that happened to pass by in confusion and said, isn't kicking okay there? In fact, when she saw the Monster Book of the Monsters in Dali's hand, her pupils shrank slightly and her heart rate quickened by a few minutes. Gone, kicking was just pretending to be dead. Just when Dali was at a loss and didn't know how to organize the language explanation, Schwer walked lightly and ran to Mrs. Figger's feet. Mimi, first sound, meow 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 meow, first sound, meow 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 meow, second sound. This is a tone that Dali has never heard before, and he didn't even know that cats could produce such diverse tones. A magical scene happened again. So it's like this, Schwer. With Schwer's meowing, Mrs. Feig occasionally nodded at Schwer, as if she understood. Turning his head, he apologetically said to Dali, I'm sorry, kid. I misunderstood you, thank you for helping them. Apologizing or not, Dali doesn't mind. The key is, Mrs. Feig can understand what Schwer is saying. Do you understand cat language? Is Mrs. Feig a wizard? Dali's eyes lit up and he took a deep breath, trying to calm his excitement. Countless thoughts flashed through my mind, and at the same time, a hesitant and curious expression appeared. Mrs. Figger, are you and Harry the same kind of person? My parents always refer to Harry as Monster Boy, and sometimes he can do many things that ordinary people cannot. I once heard them privately refer to these as magic. Dudley's words surprised Mrs. Fig's expectations, and upon reflection, he was relieved. Growing up with a natural wizard, he must have witnessed more than one inexplicable magical phenomenon. Magic riots are something that every little wizard experiences, and Dudley is also a clever child. After a moment of contemplation, Mrs. Figger said, you're very smart, child. Is there really magic? Can you teach me? I also want to learn magic. Dali's performance is like a child who has just learned that there is magic in this world, filled with a thirst for knowledge about unknown things. I'm sorry, child. I can't do it. Mrs. Figger shook her head regretfully and said, actually, it's nothing to tell you. Anyway, you'll find out sooner or later, after all, you're the brother of that child. Mrs. Figger took a deep breath and said with a serious expression, I'm like Harry, but different. For the first time, someone told Dudley about the wonders of this world, and with Mrs. Fig's narration, intelligence about the magical world that was previously unknown gradually appeared before Dudley's eyes. A world full of enchanting magic. In the world of Harry Potter, there are roughly 3 types of people. Wizards, Muggles, and Squibs. Wizards don't need to say much, they are spellcasters, wizards, and the famous Harry Potter is such a person. Muggles are those who have no connection with magic, and the original Dudley Dursley was such a person. As for the mute canon, it is a person born into a wizarding family but unable to learn magic. Mrs. Fig is a mute canon, a type of person who is different from wizards and muggles. But unlike true muggles, they cannot cast spells, but there are some special aspects compared to ordinary muggles. One of them is Mrs. Fig's ability to communicate with cats, which some wizards do not possess. P.S. It's true that Mrs. Fig is a mute canon, but the mute canon in this world is not equivalent to muggles. Compared to muggles, they still have many magical abilities, but they cannot release magic. For example, muggles cannot see dementors, Mrs. Fig can see them, and the original setting was that Mrs. Fig was a member of the Order of Phoenix, and it is said that raising cats was to make them spies. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Activate Magician Talent. New book request ticket. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Activate Magician Talent. New book request ticket. I can't cast magic. So I can't teach you magic either. Mrs. Fig put the basket aside and sat in front of Dudley, regretfully saying. Dali could hear a strong sense of disappointment from this sentence. Born in the wizarding world but unable to learn magic, this can no longer be described as a regret. Even if I know magic, I can't teach you. Learning magic requires going to Hogwarts, which is a rule in the wizarding world. Mrs. Fig began to tidy up the messy room as she spoke. A cat is already extravagant enough, with 3 cats and a monster book, it's like making a scene in heaven. Hogwarts. Dali also began to help organize, while also considering whether to tell Mrs. Fig about the current status of the monster book. Shouldn't you have to pay for it yourself, right? What currency does a wizard use? It seems to be some kind of gold coin. That's right, that's the best magic school in the world, Mrs. Hogwarts immediately snapped out of her mind when she mentioned it. Harry will definitely go there to study in the future. The tone is filled with longing. Dudley was also fascinated by it, and he really wanted to learn magic. Can I also go to Hogwarts? Dudley asked in a strange way. Mrs. Fig shook her head and said, I don't know, kid. As expected, none of the children who knew magic couldn't help but yearn for it. In fact, Mrs. Fig also knows that it is highly likely that Dudley will not be able to go to Hogwarts. Muggles and Muggle children are basically still Muggles. The large number of Muggle wizards is based on the vast Muggle base. Not to mention that there is no 1 in 10,000, the difference is not far. Choose any Muggle child, and the probability of the other being a Muggle wizard will not be much lower than winning the lottery. In the casual conversation between the two, the room was quickly cleaned up. Alright, kid. I'm going to prepare dinner, Harry's going to finish school soon. When Mrs. Fig was about to close the door of the room, Dudley pulled out a black book from somewhere. Mrs. Fig, may I read this book? Magic Potions and Potions, several large characters written on the cover. This is the textbook for Hogwarts first grade potion class. The author is Asani Jig, a wizard who is very skilled in making potions. As for why a mute canon has magic books at home she can't learn, can't she buy it and take a look? What if one day Mrs. Fig's magical talent awakens? Without any relevant regulations, dumbbells are not allowed to buy magic-related books. So this is very reasonable. As for that monster book, it was an accident. Please. I really want to learn magic. Before Mrs. Fig refused, Dali hurriedly said. His words come from the bottom of his heart, he really yearns for magic. As someone living on the edge of magic and non-magic, Mrs. Fig knows very well how Dudley feels at this moment. Perhaps it was Dudley's sincere gaze, or perhaps it was Dudley's phrase, I really want to learn magic, that touched Mrs. Fig. She agreed to Dali's request. Refusing a child's request and telling him that he is destined to never become a wizard in this lifetime is too cruel. Mrs. Fig is a good person, and good people tend to have a soft heart. In fact, according to the provisions of the Magic Confidentiality Law, Muggles are not allowed to be exposed to magic, even magical knowledge is not allowed. However, Dudley's situation is special. His younger brother is the famous Harry Potter, and his aunt is Lily Potter. He is destined to know about magic and be exposed to the magical world. It doesn't matter whether Dali really has magical talent or not. Having magical talent is just a matter of learning potions in advance, and it doesn't matter if he doesn't have it. Many potion materials are not available in the Muggle world. And Dalina had also planned this potion book for a long time. As early as he was tidying up the room, he had already set his sights on this book. Learning magic potions does not require mastery of magic. As Professor Snape, the potion master, said in the first class. In my class, you don't need to wave your wands foolishly, let alone recite spells. In a sense, as long as there are materials, even Muggles can make magic potions. By the way, Mrs. Feig, I beat it up and it seems like something's wrong with its condition. Dali handed the soft and prone monster book to Mrs. Feig and voluntarily confessed. Did it hang up? Just compensate. Mrs. Feig waved her hand indifferently and said, don't worry, the monster books of the monsters have much more tenacious vitality than you imagine. Don't say you beat them up, even if they are smashed by adults with hammers, it's okay. You see, it's like this. Mrs. Feig pinched the spine of the book and shook it. The monster book that Dali thought he had been hammered to death slowly opened his eyes. Dali, actually dealing with this book is also very simple. Let me demonstrate it by touching its spine. The expected intense reaction did not occur, and the monster book did not struggle or bite randomly after waking up. Its gaze was dull, with 4 eyes facing one side and its tongue drooping, dripping saliva continuously. It's over, I was fooled by a punch, at least it's a severe concussion. Dali awkwardly wanted to cover his face. Mrs. Feig remained silent for a while before continuing, even if there are any issues, it's okay. Coincidentally, I don't like this book. Anyway, I also brought it for others. Mrs. Feig silently added a sentence in her heart. From then on, in addition to going to school and exercising every day, Dali stayed at Mrs. Feig's house and devoured the book, Magic Potions and Potions. Mrs. Feig originally thought that Dudley was just curious about magic and could not hold on for long. After all, potions were the most boring subject in the field of magic, apart from the history of magic. Unexpectedly, Dali couldn't let go of this book. Harry was also puzzled by this. Although Dudley had studied hard before, he had never been so crazy, to the point of forgetting to eat and sleep. That's Dali, I even forgot to eat. During this time, Harry was also curious about what book Dudley was reading, but as soon as he saw the pages full of text, he decisively gave up. Proactive learning is not possible, as long as you maintain good grades. I didn't even read the content carefully, and I don't know if I will regret it in a few years. The page Harry was reading happened to introduce the difference between the boat-shaped aconite and the wolf venom aconite. To be tested. Dudley spent a happy time at Mrs. Feig's house, where there were cats, magic books, and the freedom to make delicious food. Life is endless with joy. Swimming in the ocean of knowledge is really enjoyable. After a month, Dali finally finished reading the entire content of Magic Potions and Potions. What's worse now is practice. Mrs. Feig would definitely not allow a child who is not even a wizard to make magic potions, which is such a dangerous thing. After all, she is a mute cannon, and if something happens, she can't stop it. So the study of Dali's magic potion came to an end. Dali was pondering whether he could get another magic book from Mrs. Feig to read, when the long-absent system prompt sounded again. Complete learning task. Complete the first magic book. Reward. Activates the talent of the second magician, Tanaka Shinji. This system is just not good at this point, sometimes it can be delayed. Not actively posting tasks, always notifying you of rewards after you have completed them. Seeking tickets, collecting new books and tickets is very important. Who else reported my Easter egg for legs playing year? Feedback received in the background. Damn it, I just want to make some fortune. End of this chapter.